Hey, what's up? Thanks for watching TopKlass tutorials. In this video, I'll be showing you how to mix and master beats. I'm using Logic Pro, but this applies to all other DAWs. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I have a beat I created in Logic Pro pulled up. It's a reggaeton style beat in the key of C minor. I'll play the entire song, then break it down by each instrument. Okay, so that's what I got so far. And what I'm going to do now is unhide my MIDI tracks, and then I will solo each one of these synths and break it down, starting with this one, which is the main synth melody. So I started by playing some chords, then I went in and quantized a couple notes and adjusted the velocity. I used a preset called Plucking Echoes, which is a stock sound in Logic. The only adjustment I made was I increased the attack time for the envelope to have more of a swell. Originally, it sounded like this. So to make this sound more reggaeton, I increased the attack on the envelope to 51 milliseconds to make it sound like this. I have a couple more effects on the track. I have a stereo delay plugin, an EQ that's not doing anything, and I also have a reverb bus send set up. I'll bypass the effects so you can hear the difference. The reverb I'm using is the stock reverb plugin Space Designer that comes with Logic Pro, and I'm using the preset Large Hall 6.6 seconds Beta Church. When I'm producing beats, I typically only use 1 or 2 reverbs to keep all of my instruments in the same space. I also convert all of my MIDI to audio regions to save on CPU and processing, and also ensure it sounds identical if I need to send it to another studio or I need to open it up in another DAW. So the next sound that I used, I just copied the MIDI notes down and made a couple changes to keep the same chord progressions, and I'll solo this out. And I added a stereo delay to the printed version of this. And now here's with the delay. So it just kind of helps it kind of bounce around a little bit. And then if I make the MIDI active, I'll open that up so you can see what I had going on there. So this is the MIDI for that instrument I was just playing. The next sound I used was a stock preset called Pulsing Waves that I tweaked a bit. I'll start by playing the instrument with all the effects bypassed and then add them in back in order. So that's how it sounds with no processing or effects. And the first plugin is Step Effects, which adds some movement and width. Next, I have some compression just to reduce any peaks. Next, I have an EQ with a high pass and low pass filter focused on everything between 200 and 400 hertz. And then last thing I did was print my MIDI to audio so that everything would sound exactly like how I want. For the next layer, I use the preset Analog Waves, which is the ES2 generator plugin that is a stock plugin with Logic. And I'll bypass all of the plugins and play the before, and then I'll play the after. So the first plugin I'm using is the Auto Filter plugin. So it really gives it some movement, and I used the preset stereo wide panner. I just put it on there and didn't make any other changes. It sounded great. Then I added a compressor and compressed the hell out of it just to make sure everything was nice and level. And then the last plugin I have is a EQ plugin doing a low pass and high pass filter to basically focus on everything between around 150 hertz to about 400 hertz. And then, same as all my other instruments, I just converted my MIDI region into an audio region. That way everything would sound exactly like how I wanted and no one could change it, and I could work with it in multiple studios and multiple DAWs. And I can also send this off as a tracked out session. For the pre-chorus and build-up sections, I wanted to make it sound more dark and mysterious, so I took an identical copy of the main melody and put an EQ on there and put a low-pass and high-pass filter to really focus on everything kind of in the 250 hertz area. The last plugin I used was a stock preset called Gentle Sign Bells. It's a preset for the Alchemy stock plugin in Logic, and I literally did nothing to it. I just played some MIDI notes, and I liked how it sounded, so I converted my MIDI into audio, and it sounds like this. So that's all of the synths. For my drums, I did a lot less processing because they're mostly samples that already have processing and honestly don't need it. When using samples, I control the velocity, the timing, and everything, so each note's exactly like how I want it. I don't really need compression or time adjustments. And also, most of the samples that I use already have EQ or saturation or sometimes multiple layers combined into one file. So I try to leave them exactly like how they are. If you're interested in getting some samples or loops for your music production, head on over to my website. I have a ton of sample packs across multiple genres, including pop, trap, country, reggaeton, and a lot more. Once I had a pattern I liked, I processed all of my drum MIDI into audio, and it sounds like this. So I also have some Latin percussion samples that I created separate from my main drum pattern that's only playing in certain sections. So that's all of my percussion and drum sounds, and I have everything routed to a group where I'm doing some parallel compression with a API 2500 bus compressor. I chose this compressor because it's known for being great on drums and percussion, and I really like it. The important thing is I have the mix set at 50%, so it's not compressing the entire signal. It's only doing about half, which is known as parallel compression. And then I have the stereo link set to individual, which means the compression will be different for the left and the right channel allowing the drums to feel less compressed and more open. So let's listen to before and after so you can get an idea of what this compressor is doing. So it's bringing a little bit more body and punch to the low end and the kick. It's also gluing everything together so it sounds more cohesive. And the last two plugins I have on my drum bus are a EQ and a gain plugin, which are essentially doing nothing. The gain plugin is only changing the volume. The last set of instruments are my bass, and I only have two instruments for my bass group. The first is deep bass, and the second is saw bass, which are both presets in Logic. Let's listen to the saw bass first. And now here's deep bass. So that's all of my bass stuff. Typically, I will sidechain my kick to the bass, but for this style of music, I didn't have to. If I zoom in on the bass and kick, you can see they both happen at different times, so they don't compete for the same space. I'll play just the kick and bass so you can hear what I'm talking about. The only time when they ever clash is when I'm doing the bass slide, but that's okay because I want the bass slide to stand out. So that's pretty much it. I'll open my mixer so you can see everything, and I don't use very much processing. I try to make sure everything sounds good from the start and just fits together. Organizing, naming, and color coding things and routing to groups is a big part of the mixing process for me. The more organized I am, the faster I can work, and it looks really nice too. Once someone records vocals, then I'll start to do some mixing with automation and maybe changing the structure or arrangement. Sometimes an artist will request a different drum pattern or a different snare. It just depends on the artist. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention is I have a distressor on the bass group. So I'll play the before and after. It's really not doing much, just kind of some light compression, and it's adding a little bit of tape saturation. And the last thing I'm going to talk about before I start moving on to the master chain is I have all of my reverb and my wet effects all in one group. I only used one reverb, but I had a couple to choose from. So if I decided I want to hear how it sounds in a medium or small, I could do that. So the first plugin that I have in my master chain is the stock compressor that comes with Logic, and I have it on the Studio FET. This is modeled after an 1176, and I have the threshold just below 0, ratio of 3:1, really slow attack, fast release, no makeup gain. I'm using some soft distortion. I don't like the hard or the clip distortion. I have the mix set at 100%, and I have the input gain turned up quite a bit to where I'm just getting at 0 dBs on the meter, and I'm doing that so I can get a little bit of input gain saturation from the compressor. So everything looks good and sounds good. It's just peaking in the red. The big thing is the distortion for me. It just gives a little bit more character and a little bit more volume boost. So I'll play with it off, and then I'll cycle through the different modes. So you hear how when you add that soft distortion, you're getting a little bit more of a fuller sound and a little bit more of a volume boost. So that's why I use just the soft. The next plugin that I have in my master chain is the L2 limiter from FabFilter. Really great plugin. So the first thing I do with any limiter is set the output to below 0 dB, so negative 0.1 or 0.2 usually, to prevent any clipping. And for my attack, I always set it to really fast. My release, really fast also. I'm not using any look ahead. I have true peak limiting turned on, and I have oversampling turned on as well. I also have stereo linking set to 0%, so that way the left and the right channel are compressed or limited different from each other. And then this limiter has different styles. So you can set it to transparent, punchy, dynamic, aggressive. I usually cycle through a couple of these, and then just whichever one sounds the best in response to the kick is the one that I choose. And once I have all my settings set up, I will play the track and then turn up the input gain until it just starts to limit the peaks. So I'll play the track and turn it up, and you'll notice I don't do more than 1 or 2 dBs of peak reduction. So this sounds good. I'm not doing too much limiting, and I don't hear any distortion. And if you notice, my LUFS meter was around -9 LUFS, which is really good. I'm going to leave my limiter open and talk about the second plugin in my mastering chain. This is an expander, which works the opposite of a compressor. Every time the signal falls below a certain dB, the plugin will automatically increase the volume by the ratio you have set. Now, these are kind of tricky and deceiving, and I'll explain why. I use a very low ratio because when you set a high ratio, it can cause unnatural pumping effects, especially in quiet sections. I like to test the plugin in transitions and section changes to see how it will change the dynamics and the overall feel of the mix. I'll play the track starting from the end of the first verse through the pre-chorus into the chorus section. So it definitely is louder. I had to turn down the input gain on my limiter because I started clipping a little bit too much. But if you noticed on the LUFS meter, I got about -7 LUFS. So I was able to make it about 3 dB louder. So thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments section. If you have a track you need mixed and mastered, click the link in the description, or if you need beats, head on over to our website, which is in the description also. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.